New year here, and we're back with Mr. Michael Hudson. I think we had you guys on about a year ago now, so lots has happened. The permit came in way ahead of schedule, or way ahead of what we were conversing about at least last time, which is very, very good to see, and very good for Peru at large as well. But before we get to all of this, let's just sort of do some house cleaning first. You guys raised almost 4 million CAD midsummer in June, I believe. How much? What sort of cash balance should we expect Hannan to enter the new year with?
Yeah, so we had about 3.6 at the last report, which was back in August. So it will be around the 3 mark, a little bit shy of it. I don't expect it to be above that. So it's a relatively low cash burn company because, of course, we've got Jogmec looking after one of the joint ventures in total, and we are working a lot on our ground, but it's only about $1 million odd bucks a year, and then maybe another 600 grand to run the company.
Right. So G&A is like 50-60K per month, and yeah, I mean it's very, very good. I guess in terms of warrants and stuff like this, do you expect any warrants to come in or something to bolster the cash balance in the next few months here? Is that a component we should think about or not?
We haven't gone through that full analysis, but all I know is that in terms of warrant holders, but there's none coming free until mid 26, something like that. So, I don't expect that.
Okay. And just remind everyone, what's the company capitalized at now? Because it's gone up a lot since last we chatted, which is always the case.
It's about 80 million Canadian today. So yeah, it's one of those interesting companies, right? You can opine on this, but I know there's not many big copper explorcos or explorcos looking at big systems, and let alone multiple ones. We've got multiple company makers here, but and we've got the Japanese government in joint venture with us, and we've got Tech, one of the largest companies in Canada, at 9.9%. So there's the upside, but then the downside is we haven't yet drilled a hole. So there's a lot of anticipation around this company, and we're getting very close, and that's why we're on a very nice trajectory, I think, from what we found, and we're getting the permits and heading towards drilling.
Yeah. So we'll get to sort of reminding everyone about the 2 big porphyry epithermal camps that you guys have, and it was at Valiente-Belen you got the permit for now. But you have a couple of steps before starting. I think it was the CIRA that you quoted in one of your press releases. Can you explain what your expectation is when you will get that? I presume it's sort of a non-item in terms of the timeline.
Yeah, no, we've had it, I think, 5 times already. It's the certificate for archaeological remains, basically, is the translation, and we've received it, in multiple times. I think 5 already during the last few years, as we've just kept on asking for it, and we need to have it once again to initiate activities. So let's talk about the steps. We got our DIA. That's the big one. The DIA is the big one. That's the Declaration Impacto Ambiental, which is an EIA, basically an environmental impact assessment. Did a lot of work a year ago around noise, water, population. We had to have a public participation meeting, get the sign-off of all the local people, etc., and make sure our impacts were minor and commensurate with what we were doing, and that we did, and then we submitted that, and that came in 11 months, so from January last year to mid to late November. We got it. Those DIAs were taking up to 2+ years, and we got it in less than a year. So Peru is acting very much quicker. You said that. Once you get your DIA, then there's a few other steps. In the old DIAs, you needed 2 main steps. One was to initiate activities and the water permit. The water permit, through this whole fastening of the non-bureaucratic, then removing the bureaucratic steps, I should say, has now been built into the DIA. So we have the water permit for the DIA at Valiente. We don't have it yet at San Martin because you've got to get it after initiate activities. We can talk about the San Martin DIA. So we've got the 2 DIAs, San Martin being Jogmec and Valiente being 100% us. So we have that DIA. we need to initiate activities. That's all we need to do. To get there, we need the CIRA, which is a certificate of archaeological remains. We made that application last year. We expect to get that this month in January 2025. It's been received before, but we just need one with the current date on it. And then we also need sign-off of all the local people from the title holders, and that is much easier to do in Valiente because we have landholders with titles. In San Martin, they don't hold the titles, so it's become a bit more complex. So, 100% owned project, the title holders have essentially all signed off, and we're working within areas where the title holders are supportive, and that's a big area. It's 8 by 2 or 3 kilometres, 8 kilometres by 2 or 3. So they're the two, CIRA and the landholders, and then once we've got those in place, we can apply for the initiate activities. I think it's 40 days nominally, but will take a few months. And if everything goes to plan, then we should have that initiate activities towards the end of Q1 and be ready to drill at the start of Q2, which has been our guidance since we received that permit in November, and everything seems to be going to plan to date.
Very, very good. So I guess let's just sort of dig into. It's sort of an unavoidable topic. I know you don't want to discuss timings of things like this, but people are not stupid, so they can read your cash balance is 3 million at the start of the year. You're gonna start drilling in Peru. It's not the most expensive, but it's not the cheapest either. And you're gonna do hand rigs as you have done before. I think it's San Martin, I presume, also Valiente.
Well, hand portable. So they're rigs that can go to 1,000 metres, but they have no component that's more than, I think, 120 kilos. So you can break it down and hand port it, hand carry it in, or chopper it in or whatever. In our case, we'll hand carry it in because we are very close to roads. So you're just coming off, driving these things in by truck and moving them into the drill platforms, 100 metres, 500 metres, maybe a K max.
So before we even discuss the targets, I mean, let's just think quickly on the sort of the plan to get started here. So the unit cost, what would you expect to see per meter approximately?
Yeah, we've gone through the exercise a number of times, and we think about $300 all in drill cost per metre is about the right thing. Okay, I see where you're going. So 1,000 metres is about 300,000 US, about $500,000 Canadian.
Yes, and you said that your G&A is very low, which is very good. I mean you're doing like 60-70K Canadian, right, per month or something like this. So it's and is that including holding costs as well?
No, there's two costs. There's the G&A, which is actually low, like you say, and then there's a cost to run Valiente. And that's around about the 70 US a month with all the geologists and teams we've got out there. So it's about 150 a month or something like that we're burning in our own cash balance, maybe up to 200 if we have a more active month. So let's say 200. So in 6, it's about $2 million a year with an active work program, a little bit more than that actually.
Yeah, but I mean, now you're starting to drill, and as you said, you're capitalized now at, you said 80 million Canadian, or between 70 to 80 million Canadian there. So it's and your last raise was at what valuation? If you remind us, you raised almost 4 million Canadian.
Hey,
I think
you
might have been like 45 or 50, I think, somewhere around there. The share price was,
I should know that off the top of my head.
40 to 50 cents, right, or something in that range.
It was very much in that range. I think it was 35, maybe even. But
yeah, so probably like 40 million CAD. So you've almost doubled since that race. So if we just do some top of the head exercise here, Mike, you're going into a drill program. You have 3 very good targets that have been permitted to be drill tested. So what sort of commitment would you like to have up front? Just outline your sort of permutations of thinking. You could go in and not take in any capital before getting some results, but then you would go sort of slow and have limited flexibility in the short term, I guess. So you can always raise and use them. I mean, you have many options that you could pick here.
the one rule in or two rules that you never talk about when you're going to raise, because you don't really know, and people can surmise, and they're not stupid, of course. So, but you never anticipate a raise, because people will tend to sell into that, and that. So the secret is that shareholders will get to fund this company, and that we won't be doing it at a discount. So the only way for those people who aren't shareholders already will be to buy on market. So that's one way to counter that. Then the other is that we do have the option to drill, but it would be a few thousand meters, more or less, $1 million program, and then we'd have to go out and raise more capital, of course, because these targets are going to be drilled for years if they show any grade, and what we see at surface is a very good indication. The systems are there, there's no doubt. They're big, but where's the grade in the system? Because at surface, of course, you can't see it. It's all leached, and you just don't know what the primary grade below the weathering is. So the other way to do it is to go and say, well, let's go and give it a proper shot. And with such big systems and the unknown of knowing where the best parts are, you really need to commit meters. So it's either go out there and do a smaller program, and we bet that we'll hit some very good holes initially, and that will obviously be positive for the company, or we take a decision and say, let's go and raise enough to get 5 to 10 kilometers in the bank.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess just to reflect, I think last year your annual dilution would probably be fairly, I mean, quite precisely at 10%, which is very good for an explorer to drive forward, and most likely. I mean, it depends, right? But say that the current valuation sits there, you would probably not raise more than 10% dilution this year as well. If the valuation hypothetically would just remain flat, you would be able to take in $5 million US,
yeah.
which would be a lot of drilling. I mean, to do the first
I really hope that we're not staying here at 80 either million market cap. With the targets that we've got, they are unique, they are highly desirable. So that will also dictate when we raise capital, is when and what the share price is, and we're not going to, certainly, if the share price goes down, we're not going to do the second option, and we'll go out there and drill the thing and create value that way. If the share price is reflective of the opportunity, and shareholders are there, then we'll go and raise. It's all around that cost of capital and managing it. So, I know I'm being a bit obtuse, but you don't make these decisions.
Yeah, I mean, it's correct, but I mean, the point that I'm trying to highlight, if people will be able to understand it themselves, you're in a strong position, irrespectively, at the current valuation, and even if it's a bit lower, you're still in a very strong position to do what you want to do this year fully, I think, and you're not going to dilute shareholders that much at all.
No, we're very okay. That's a nice way to frame it. Thank you. We're very, very miserly around dilution and who gets to fund the company, and that's the way to create a higher value per share as opposed to a higher market cap in isolation. And I've learned the hard way over the years, and I've been taught by some of the best in the industry on how to manage these share structures. And yeah, you're very right. We're in a very good position today, and you've got to work hard to maintain that. I don't take it for granted. But getting a great few drill holes into a part of the system just may be the way to go also, right? So before we go back and raise money. So, and it relates to the work that we're doing now with all the IP coming in, etc., as to the strength of the drill targets, and that doesn't mean they're or the most obvious drill targets that relate to the geochem, and we've got great geochem here and a big whopping IP anomaly under it with lots of the right alteration at surface. If it's so obvious, they're obviously going to be easier to drill than some more esoteric targets, and ore bodies don't always always just go bang. They take a bit of work. So it comes down to the quality, the obviousness of the targets and the confidence we've got in them too.
So I guess let's just, without further ado, showcase the three main targets at Belen that's permitted now. Sequentially, you received since last we spoke. Chiefly the suite of geophysics over all three targets. I think you had the geochem back then as well. You might have done some more geochem, but let's just go through these three targets, and then you can speak to how you would envision drill testing them initially, right? Ricardo, Vista, and Sortilegio.
Okay, so here we have our two main areas in Peru, and this has slightly been updated. It's a little lower. It's around 1,500 kilometres now, as we've just relinquished a few smaller areas. But this is the San Martin project up here in the north, which is the Jogmec JV. The Valiente project, the one that makes us very excited, is this bottom southern part. They're separated by about 450 kilometres from the top to the very bottom. Very different geology, sediment-hosted copper-silver systems up here. They're in the overlying rocks, and in the underlying rocks, we've got the porphyry epithermal systems that are down here. The similarity is that they're over the top of the Andes. You can see all the mines here at the top of the Andes, and all the tenements by third parties are in grey. You can see that we're on the edges, if you like, of where a lot of the tenements are. Still, you can see the fine shading. It's still quite hilly. We're about 1,000 meters high before you get into the Amazon. But this is the rain shadow not the rain shadow. It's where the rain falls in the Andes as it comes over the top, and then it just drops here. So this is a lot of vegetation. So it's jungle, but high jungle. If we just zip through, we're making lots of discoveries like this, outcropping copper mineralizations. Is copper mineralization that's leaching out of the rocks and making and covering the rocks. It's very impressive when you walk across very blue copper carbonates like you can see here. But let's just zoom into this new belt that we call Valiente. And this is zooming into that area. You can see epithermal systems like antimene, pyrrhina, and skarn systems, porphyry coppers like antimena and toromocho, etc. At the top of the Andes. We're looking at the same age rocks, so a Miocene belt. So pyrrhina is Miocene. It's about 14 or 15 million years old. That's the epoch where there's been a lot of metal come through the Andes, and generally the subduction is occurring here. That the oceanic plate is going under the crust, the continental crust, and it's literally banging into the margin of South America there, and that's why you get the Andes here. And this is what we call the back arc. So it's away from that arc, that volcanic arc that forms where these two, the oceanic plate and the continental crust, collide. And generally, you're getting younger rocks here and older rocks as you go further east. And in this case, there's some reason these younger rocks form this far out. There's probably some connecting structures that are trans-arc or crossing the arc like this that have brought the intrusions as the oceanic plate has been going under the crust here up this far east. And so it's really rewritten the geodynamic history of the Andes out through here. But the key point is it's a very fertile time and the right age rocks. So that's why we're very excited, because we've got a whole belt, 150 kilometres, that is essentially, well, it is all under our control. We've got 18 different porphyry epithermal systems down through here. We've worked on about 8 of them in much more detail. We've flown all our tenure, or most of our tenure, with MAG. We've done all the stream sediment sampling. That's what's happened over the last few years. And then we've gone in and worked in great detail. We've had up to 8 geologists this year with field teams. So teams of about 30 out in these areas, and they're big, and they're vast, and really have never been worked before. There's a lot of placer mining, and a lot of these tenements in grey here that come off ours are people who are mining the alluvial gold. So it's been mined, if you like, by smaller scale interests, but nobody's ever found the primary sources. So this is the big blob up here in the northern part is our main area of interest, and that's the Belen area and the Previsto area, and I'll talk to that. We have some other tenements down here we've done less on. We've flown some of the mag, and that's the earlier part of the project, the southern part. This northern part is where we've really focused on. It's easier access up through there, and we found the really good stuff early on, and we focused on it. We haven't put out the data yet, but we've just flown a LiDAR survey up through here in the jungle, and it has been amazingly helpful at not only showing access but mapping geology and lithology and intrusive rock and offsets and faults. And the only thing we did wrong was we should have flown that much earlier last year rather than towards the end of the season. So let's just go into each different project in this northern part. So this is the northern part here, and this is the area called Belen, where we have that DIA, the Declaration Impacto Ambiental, which is the permit to drill. So we've got 40 drill platforms in that area down through here. Each one of these stars is a project. So we have the Ricardo Herrera porphyry down here in the south. We have the Vista Alegre epithermal, so it's a gold system. Ricardo's a copper plus or minus gold. And then we got Sortilegio, which is more alkalic, less silica in the rocks, and these are a subset of porphyries that are very common in BC or in the Macquarie Arc in Australia. They're gold-rich porphyries, so they have copper and gold. And that's what another unique part of this setting is. And we're going to find, I think, alkalic gold systems alone out through here as well, which makes it really interesting. There's the opportunity to find tens of millions of ounces of gold in these systems is very real, and they can become very big. So that Belen area we'll look at in a bit more detail. We do have another porphyry here at Divisoria, and we've got very high grade zinc and lead in skarns around that porphyry, but it's blind and we haven't found as much. So then we moved up and spent a number of years going through the social licensing up here in Previsto. And Previsto we'll look at after the Belen area. We made that discovery essentially less than a year ago now, and that's where we've been working all this year, essentially, put most of our work in. That's where we flew the LiDAR, and that's what we call the monster. It's big. It's a big system, and I'll go through that earlier stage, but that's the one that really gets me very excited. These systems down here are big and company makers in their own right, but this really is a very, very large system. The footprint, the exploration footprint is something like about 5 by 5 kilometres that we have gold above. Not exclusively, but pretty much commonly 0.1 grams per tonne in soils, and that's pretty much unheard of. So as an exploration target, it's a humongous system. It really is very large, and we're starting to now crack that, and we're very excited about that. But we haven't got the drill permitting there yet because we haven't started it, because we want to know where the best parts of that system are. So we're exploring that still to get those targets up, and we've really done that now in terms of having a year or 6 months, the last 6 months up through there. So we know that now. So Belen, let's go into that area. So this is the Vista Alegre area. So if we just go back, the Vista Alegre area is this central epithermal system. Here we have the geology on the left and the mag on the right. Lots of ore grade and semi-ore grade boulders and outcrops going 0.1 to a few grams floating off that system. And there's a big structure that controls that. The scale here, that's 900 metres, so it's over about 2.5 kilometres long, the system. If we just zoom in to the geochem, you can start to see here the geochem of that system. Remember, we got Ricardo Herrera just to the south here and Sortilegio to the north over an 8-kilometre trend. Here we're looking at the gold in soils. So there's along that structure, that fault is with that line with the little triangles on it. You can see the gold more or less follows that. It's a bit higher grade in the north. Again, that same scale. So about 1.5 kilometres of good golden soils. It drops off a bit further here to the south, the gold, and we've got lots of boulders, ore-grade boulders here that are coming off from the west to the east. We've got outcrops that are running grams through here. The outcrops are in the squares. On the right-hand side is arsenic, which is associated with gold, and certainly you see that in the northern part. We've got this massive arsenic anomaly down here in the south. That's probably because it's becoming more skarn-like, maybe, but something's changing. The gold is dropping off in the soils, but the arsenic isn't. So the system's still continuing. So there's 2.5 kilometres of that system with all the right geochemistry at surface: soils, rocks, boulders, etc. In situ mineralization where we can see it. Very poor outcrop over most of this. Now we've just done this IP, which is induced polarization. You see two things with IP. You see chargeability and resistivity. So an IP survey literally puts charge into the ground, and then it's turned on and off very quickly. And that's the transmitters are turned on and off very quickly, and then the receivers, which are separate parts of the equipment, measure the decay of that chargeability or the resistivity of the rocks that they can measure in 3 dimensions, because you're measuring in 3 dimensions over the surface. And you can tell if something's chargeable, it's got disseminated sulfides in it, so the charge is leaving the rock more slowly than if you didn't have sulfides, because the sulfides hold the charge. And if you've got resistive or low resistive rocks are like quartz, so they don't pass a current as easily as something like a clay, where you'd pass a current through a clay that's wet. So they're low resistors, clays, for example. Massive sulfides are also conductive or low resistors, the same thing. But more so, I think we're looking at clays here and sulfides, basically. And sulfides and clays are associated with the alteration in these systems. So your eye is drawn here to this big, long IP anomaly here. We're looking in plan view, down like a bird, and this is about 150 metres below the surface. And here's our structure, if you can see it in grey here, the big break. We've got this sulfidic or chargeable zone that is pretty consistent right along there, and then we've got some cross structures coming up through here in the north. You can see that often mineralization is not always in one orientation. So the sulfur, at least, which is generally associated with mineralization, I mean the pyrite and chalcopyrite, which are the sulfides, are associated with gold. So we love that data. It worked a treat. So it's given us geochem, remembering the soils that we had, and then as we go to depth, we're seeing those soils replicate in the geophysics. And it's a little harder to see, but it says that band just to the western side of this fault, there's the blue is the low resistors or the conductors. The high resistors are the red. So if you look at the view here, so the low resistors or the clay areas are coinciding with that chargeable zone, and often that's the case because sulfides weather, and they can create clay as a product of weathering, but also mineralized systems have a lot more clay around them. That's just the nature of these epithermal systems. So that's extremely encouraging, and that continues down. We've got all that information at every level down to about 500 metres. So we love Vista Alegre, walk-up drill targets essentially there. So then we were talking about the quality of the drill targets. Now, I haven't got the Ricardo here. Let me just see. That didn't go to Ricardo, but I know we haven't got the Ricardo here's the Ricardo initial geophysics. We put out some geophysics a week before Christmas. This deck hasn't been updated with that, but it's essentially the same. So if we look at the Ricardo area, so we're just looking at Vista Alegre, which was in here. Ricardo's this very well zoned porphyry here, and we're showing the chargeability here in 3 dimensions. So this is the surface. We see that chargeability going to depth all over the porphyry. So there's no doubt the porphyry's there, the geochem's on the surface, and the chargeability is going to depth. And there's something like of sulfidic material in that IP anomaly. There's something like 500 or 600 million tons of sulfidic material. Doesn't mean it's got grade, so we've got to drill it to determine that. But it's a big target in its own right, and it's got all the right leach geochemistry at surface. And here's Sortilegio, which is the project to the north. We haven't put the IP out around that target yet because it's still being worked on, but it did finish just before Christmas. This is the geochemistry. And again, another big target. Look, this is the copper in soils, a big ring. And in the centre, I think that's just because there's some younger rocks that cover the older rocks. So it looks like it's a bit of a donut, but it's just a little hill here of younger rocks, so they don't have the geochemical signature that the mineralized rocks do. But a big porphyry in its own right, and we love it because it's alkalic. It's got a lot of copper here and gold. We love it because it's got the gold. So a lot happening here too, and wait for the IP, which will come out very shortly. And just more rocks from the epithermal area, multiple grams. This is running in the boulders, 1.5 grams, 2.7 grams, in all the right looking rocks, and that's what you want to see. So and even in outcrop, we're sampling up to 3 grams here at Vista Alegre. Let's just go quickly to back to the area, the broader area, just to show the scale. So we just looked at Vista Alegre in more detail and Ricardo Herrera porphyry and Sortilegio porphyry here. That's about 8 kilometres from top to bottom. That's where we've got the Dia. That's the Belen area with the 3 target areas. Now, if we go something like 20-odd kilometres to the northeast, this is gold in soils across the whole thing. So you can see that Vista Alegre stands out, and it's 2.5 kilometres long, and spoke to you how excited I was there. And Sortilegio, there's the gold coming out of Sortilegio, and no doubt Ricardo is not absent of gold either. But if we look up here at Previsto, this is 5 by 5 kilometres here. And you can see here's 0.1 is the red to purple, or the red to pink. And you can see broadly, this is a lot of ridgetop sampling that we've made, so the sampling is a little biased, maybe biased against finding the mineralization because we're just going on the resistive rocks on the ridges, or maybe the resistive rocks have the gold, so it's the way to initially sample something. But you can see it's 5 by 5 kilometres, and to look for a porphyry that's 5 by 5 kilometres is unique. It's Escondida type footprints. This is a big system, and here we've got lots going on. We have done the IP here. These alkalic porphyries don't necessarily always hold a lot of sulfur, so the IP didn't just show one big blob here, and that doesn't worry us because it may be low in sulfur, and it was a hard survey to capture, and we only did 2 big lines across here and here. But what we have is actually from here, which we call Previsto East, right up through 4 or 5 kilometres to the west, we've got 800 metres of vertical relief. So Previsto East here is on the road, and then you're really quite remote up at the very tops of mountains through here, and then you've got the sort of intermediate area through here, and we're seeing all the system develop. It looks like a big blob, but it's actually a multi-phase epithermal porphyry that, because we've got the vertical relief, we're seeing the system intact. So in the centre we have more copper-rich area, and we've trenched 1 to 200 metres down creeks at 0.1 to 0.2 copper. That's impressive in a leach zone. What you want to see is sort of 0.5 to 0.7% copper or copper equivalent in a porphyry these days to be economic over big areas. The gold certainly will help the economics here if there's something economic there, but these things get leached near the surface. And the rule of thumb is that it's a five-time upgrade generally, but that depends where you are, the amount of sulfur in the system, how acid it's been, how much rain, where you're sitting. So it's a really not completely valid rule of thumb to apply. So I don't want to try and over-egg that. But we're seeing a lot of metal in the system, and the question will be, where are the best grades of this system? In the centre, we've got the copper that we've been trenching over hundreds of metres, just where we're seeing it. It doesn't mean it's only 100 or 200 metres wide, but it does that area where we've trenched it is over 3 or 4 kilometres of strike alone. And beside that, we're starting to see gold-rich parts of the system too, and that's, I think, where this alkalic gold zone is starting to emerge, and we're starting to see some very high-grade gold in rocks. So keep your eyes on that central zone. Up in the top parts of the system, it looks much more gold-rich, less copper. The soils for copper drop off in this upper parts because we're up in the epithermal parts of the system. We have done less work out here because it's a little more remote and it won't be as easy to drill initially. Then out here on the eastern side, it's about 3 kilometres away, we've got a thing called Previsto East. Lots of gold in soils, lots of gold and copper in boulders and all the right-looking rocks. They look fantastic right beside the road, but we haven't been able to find any outcrop there, just boulders the size of your car and smaller, and lots of them over 1.5 kilometres of strike. Now, we did the IP, a couple of IP lines here to see if there was anything at depth, but we couldn't find anything because we couldn't get charged through that very clay-rich overburden, so the charge couldn't get down into the bedrock. So it was a null result, basically, rather than a zero result, proving there was nothing there. So we don't know if that's a primary source. There's people in our team, including Lars, who's pretty convinced it's primary. There's others who think it could be shedding, and this is maybe where my half skepticism is. It could be just shedding from 3 kilometres away. It's taken off a part of this porphyry and moved it down gradient, and you're left with this big scree. It could be glacial or something like that, and it's not unusual to have these glacial deposits actually mined in Peru at times. Yanacocha has a part of the deposit that's been ripped off and moved by a glacier and deposited, and it's been mined. So that could be the case. If whatever, it's certainly not a part of the system you drill in isolation without targeting the rest of it, because you just might be targeting beneath scree that is mineralized, but you mightn't find the primary source here. So the best area, and what we know is starting to emerge, is this central area. The bit more challenging because it's a bit further away from the roads, and we may have to do. We're just trying to work through whether we have to do 6 months of baseline data or a couple of seasons, and that would be a big time difference outcome there. So we're working that through, but we're just trying at this stage to really understand where the best geology is. So almost there, like I said. So that's a good summary of Previsto without taking up too much of your gigabytes in recording. I think that goes to the heart of the system. Remember, we've got 150 kilometres. This is a 30-kilometre window of that. Belen, we're going to be drilling ideally soon, Q2. Belen's only about 4% of our total land holding. So there's a lot going on here. There'll be a lot more, and our challenge is to drill the best parts of the system. And I think at least we've got some very good targets first up, which makes me very happy how the amazing team we've got in Peru has worked ferociously to do that over the last few seasons.
So if we just look at the 3 targets for drill testing now, how would you initially test them? I mean, you say that and which one would you test first as well? I mean, you just talk through that, the initial sort of few thousand meters of deployment.
Yeah, so For a junior, gold is easier. So I like Vista Alegre because we got the opportunity to drill a multi-million ounce system there in isolation in Vista Alegre. So that is an easier story to drill out. It's an easier project to market and drill. Porphyries are harder to do that, and you need lots of drilling, and they're grade dependent, etc. So they're just not as simple as gold only systems. That being said, I would not just drill Vista Alegre without putting a number of holes into the best parts of the IP and geochem and geology, combined targets at both Sortilegio and Ricardo Herrera very early, because especially Sortilegio is a very weird beast, that alkalic porphyry with very high grade copper and gold that we found in boulders at surface. Ricardo Herrera looks really interesting. It's just a bit more standard. I think we understand it better. It looks like a calc-alkaline porphyry, and the right zoning and the alteration, and that truly is a grade question. So I'd be going first Vista Alegre, and then putting 3 or 4 holes into Ricardo Herrera and Sortilegio to understand those systems, and then perhaps going back to Vista Alegre when we've got those first drill holes. But if any of these systems have grade, we're drilling here for years. It's not just a simple project and go in there and drill. So the system looks like it's got the fertility, but we've got to demonstrate that now.
So in terms of the DIA, I mean, how much you have a number of platforms. How long would you think that can support you before you would have to go back and sort of redo these things? I mean, you would be able to prove these systems to a fairly good extent at least, and know what they probably are.
Yeah, so we've got 40 drill platforms. You can drill as many holes as you like from any drill platform. Yeah. So there's the option to move once you have the DIA and the initiate activities. There's the option to move drill platforms. So you can't use more than 40, but if you collected all the data, which we have, you can move drill platforms. So we've got some in the right areas, some not so much in the right areas, because we had to put those drill platforms in very early before the IP and a lot of the geology and geochem was understood, because we were trying to get ahead of the permitting, if you like. So we where we are in Previsto, right? We'll always continue to do the work to narrow down. So we're okay. 40 drill platforms, you can drill a lot of 40 drill platforms.
And what's the process to move them? Is that something that can be done within a month, or is that a sort of a rigmarole to get done?
As it's been explained to me, I haven't done it forever, but it's a matter of months.
Okay. So you would go into Vista Alegre with and you would probably mobilize one rig to start, and then probably fairly hypothetically then add another rig fairly within 3 to 5 months time frame. Fair to say.
One rig initially, absolutely, because in exploration you want to collect your data sequentially and never be ahead of your understanding of what you've been drilling, so you're not wasting meters. But if we start to see and understand the system and understand how it holds together, and the market cap's performing and our cost of capital is right, you obviously go for it. And I'd love to see that.
So basically, you would put the first rig at Vista Alegre. You would see what you're getting there. You would confirm with grade, assaying the gold. If it looks good, you bring in a second rig. That rig is going to go to the other 2 porphyry targets.
I don't know. I think you're waiting for 6 weeks probably between drilling a hole and getting assays. So you could go and put 2 or 3 or 4 weeks into Vista Alegre, and then go into the other targets, and while you're putting together Vista Alegre and understanding it. I wouldn't bring in more than one rig initially, but we haven't gone through all this scheduling to the detail. We've got the drill targets and we're starting to rank them now, and but I'm giving you my gut feel, and you don't want, it's a fine balance between understanding and and momentum. You bring in the momentum when you've got the understanding.
Um, I guess could we just briefly zoom in on Vista Alegre again with the soils in the background, and you can just showcase where you would probably tack the first hole, I guess, or you should probably have a pretty good sense of that at this point, or somewhat
Well,
maybe accuracy.
we've got dozens of targets here, so I can talk theoretically around. Well, not theoretically. I can talk through like we've been talking. We're planning drill holes, right?
Mm.
So we've got this in 3 dimensions, not just 2 dimensions, because we're dealing with the 3-dimensional IP. I'm only showing you one depth slice, 150 meters below surface. So we know the way those bodies are dipping. They're dipping to the west in this case, those chargeable bodies, etc., down through here. So you never want to test just one part of the system, and you want to really try and understand what's happening. So this boulder field out through here, look at this, maximum 2.7 grams gold and 44 grams silver, averaging 0.4 grams and 2 grams. Not bad in just random samples, not all grade at all, but that's silicified boulder field over a kilometre. If we go here, it's actually associated with that you can see it here in the white, the higher resistivity, which is what you want to see. So, and we can map that. It doesn't look so flash as a defined target, but the orange is what that white coincides with. So that's a target. The IP is a target because, obviously that's the sulfides, and it's a little bit offset from the soils because it's dipping to the west here. So we'd be drilling holes into the better parts of that IP over the better parts of the soils and the gold. So you'd be targeting some of the northern stuff. Then, we've got a very well-defined structure going northwest here, again, correlating with lots of gold. And look at these gold in outcrop, 3 grams, and it's associated there with an IP target. Now, that's over hundreds of meters there. So that's an easy walk-up target there. So you'd be testing that. So there's certainly, and we'd be ranking all of those based on geochem IP, and then you just got to make a decision which you think is your better targets early on, and which is the lower hanging fruit. You can't try and be everything to everyone in life, and you certainly can't try to be everything to everyone here. But that's the kind of thinking we're going through in terms of ranking overlapping targets, but in understanding as much as we can with the geology. We didn't see a structure here, but the IP clearly shows one that's orthogonal to the main structure, which we can map at surface. So those cross structures are really interesting, and there's a lot of gold in them. So lots of really compelling walk-up targets already. And if you, and I've been in this situation, I've been sent to a project where I had no data, I didn't know much of the project, and I've been told that a rig's coming in a week. We've got a rig coming. You sort of have a lump in your throat hoping you drill the best areas. But if you and I went out there, Gorm, we'd have 20 holes, and we'd have to drill the top 5. We'd do it, but we'd go, shit, we hope we've got more money to test more than just 5 holes. But you've still got to rank, and we're limited always by bucks, right? We're not absolutely by bucks, but you just don't want to go out there and put 10 rigs there all of a sudden, because you'd get lost in the data. So you collectively build up the story and be methodical about it.
And Mike, could you just, I mean, obviously you haven't drilled anything yet, so it's difficult to ascertain what grades you will see here. But in terms of volume, what sort of volumes could you see for this gold system here?
Well, I sort of gave you
range.
the hints there before. This has got potential to be tens of millions of tons, tens and tens of millions of tons, and a multi-million ounce system. It's got the area to be that. You're talking close to 2 kilometres or thereabouts, I think, from top to bottom, maybe a little less, and you've got multiple targets over 500 or 600 metres width. And you're not going to get all that mineralised, of course, but it has the opportunity to be, and it depends on the grade. what the economics of this could potentially look like. It's all around the grade. So I keep coming back to what are the grade of these systems, because they're very real. They're there. We know the rocks at surface. We know the geochemical footprint at surface. We know it extends into the third dimension with the IP. But what is the grade? And if we start finding ore grades in our work at surface, which we haven't completely yet, not absent in absence, these are all grades up through here, if you want to call something ore grades, probably 2 gram cutoff is something that you'd look at in a system out through here, rule of thumb. But these are weathered systems, so that's why we haven't seen the ore grades yet. But maybe we'll start seeing ore grades of gold, which is more resilient than the copper in these weathered systems. So we've got a lot more field work to do.
And you said 500 million tons or something like that for Ricardo and Sortilegio. I guess your hypothetical volume there should be quite a lot higher. That could be a billion ton plus idea if you just look at the footprint that we're seeing.
So it's the Ricardo. Let's go and see the IP before we start giving volumes for Sortilegio, because I haven't literally seen that yet. We just finished the survey, like I said, before Christmas. But I was talking about the chargeable rocks, the sulfide rocks at Ricardo, just in terms of the footprint. It won't be all mineralized necessarily, so but it's a big target in its own right. And then you can start, if we're starting to talk scale, we're talking about all these systems down here that have the potential to be, very large systems in their own right. Any one of those 3 is a company maker if it works, for a junior company. And then look at this. This is, we've got the Earth and Mars and Jupiter out here, and then we've got I don't know, not the sun.
And that's 0.1 grams per ton of gold and salts over that. I mean, what would you even compare it? I mean, you've looked at many mineral systems, studied some of the biggest ones as well when they were discovered. I mean, what would you, in terms of footprint, this looks to be like one of the biggest deposits in the world, or in that sort of context.
That's big. Yeah, I haven't seen anything like it in my career.
Because 0.1 gold in soils doesn't just appear randomly. I mean, that means that there's something significant close by.
Yeah, and we've just got to work through the social and the political, and make sure Peru continues to advance. And we've got a lot of support from the local people, and we haven't talked much about the ESG and side of things. The local people, actually, there's more local people, especially in Belen, than there is in any of our other projects. And I used to think that was a weakness, but it's actually a strength, because you've got more supporters who support the project, close to the project, and that's what we've got here. We've got a very engaged and, not absolute, but a very engaged and motivated set of local people who are supporting what we're doing.
So we have 3 company makers that's being tested this year. And Previsto, what's your current take on the timeline to get that permitted? What do you think? I mean, you said there was 2 permutations, one 6-month data gathering, or it could be multi-season. So can you just outline these 2 and what they would implicate, and when you would know which one will be the case?
Yeah, so if it's 6 months, then we're starting really collecting that as soon as the rainy season's finished, which is sort of March, April, and then we've done a little bit of work, so it might be another 3 months' work or something. So by the middle of the year, we'll have that data, and then going on the basis of what we saw at Belen, less than a year to permit a deer. So we could have it by mid-26. But if you're going to add another 18 months, then it's going to be a lot longer, right? So there's options for us to, obviously, we want to drill this quicker than not, and we haven't had the discussions with the authorities, and we truly don't know. The difference is between drilling in disturbed areas where people have been farming, and for the half of Previsto, it's being farmed, and like I said, the eastern side's on a road with villages, little villages, but villages. But as you go up to these areas up here in the top areas there, that's into jungle that hasn't been farmed because it's more remote. So it just depends where that and we need to do more mapping ecologically to understand where those boundaries are, etc. And how far away are we finding these things? We're still doing more work. We're still getting assays coming in today from the lab from the work we did in December. Obviously we're trying to focus on understanding this central bit, because you don't want to go to the east in isolation, and this is a bit too remote, so that it falls down to the central area. And we like what we see in this central area. It's the most advanced part of the system to date. So at the best, mid-26 and then longer. But let us have the discussions, and we know how to operate in Peru. We've got some very good people. Kathy Vargas is our general manager down there, and Lars and I work extremely close with Kathy in terms of trying just to get the right balance, right? We don't want to go and try and permit something way out there that will take so long if we could permit something in a smaller area and test it quicker. Obviously, that's the best thing. But we've got years of drilling if it works at Belen. So I've got that here now in our back pocket. We've got that in our back pocket. So it gives me some pause for comfort that we've got more than enough to do while we're working up Previsto, both geologically and permit-wise.
So if Mike were to assign a probability of this being drilled in some capacity next year, what probability would you assign? That doesn't have to be a full DIA, but at that point you would probably position to be able to do something, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, so if it's a DIA, it's next year. But what's the percentage of a DIA? It's very hard to know. I think we've got a lot of it in our hands. So I'd like to think that we can work to getting a DIA completed, but it's just that it's got to overlap with the best geology, and I don't really know the answer to that. So I think we'll work in every way, shape, and form to work through the DIA, and I just hope that our geological work allows us to do that with the ecological work. So I'm not going to give you a number, because our aim is to drill with a DIA. That's 100% true.
Sure, but there are other ways you could get a smaller permit to drill some limited drilling quicker, and that could be potentially explored. But it's not something you're actively pursuing to potentially do later this year or something like this point in time. You're just going for.
Well, we could drill Previsto East fairly quickly. Because it's on a road, and we could actually have a lower level than the DIA. It's called an FTA, that would be rather silly, because we're just not quite sure what's under Previsto East, right? It could be just shedding, like I said, or has it got a primary source? If it was primary mineralization there, we'd be doing that, but we haven't been able to find outcrop. We haven't been able to get the IP through the overburden. So it would be a bit foolhardy just to go down the FTA, and you can't overlap these things once you start them too, right? So,
yeah, no, that makes sense. So I guess we should just talk about San Martin briefly. Maybe you can just remind everyone what's happened in 2024, and then discuss what the expectations are for 25. What sort of budget do you think Jorgmek will go with, and what is expected to take place?
So this is our area up here in San Martin. We've got a great partner in JOGMEC. It's the Japanese government and their investment arm that invests in companies like ours to find minerals, future supplies of minerals for their industry, basically. And we've had, it's a sediment-hosted copper system. We've demonstrated copper over this 100 kilometres from the south to the north. The average width of mineralization is about 0.9 meters, and its averages about just under 2% copper and about an ounce silver. So there's a lot of copper there. There's a question around how continuous at a point-by-point basis it is, because the reductant that sucks up the copper is plant-based material. So it's a little more erratic, from here to here, literally in that. Whereas in the Kufa-Schiefer, which is an amazing system up in Poland and Germany, it's dust that's fallen out of the suspension of the ocean, and it forms a very consistent reductant. So you can drill here and literally drill 200 meters away, and you know the consistency. So that's one thing that sort of worries me a little bit. But I really like what we found outside of that area, further west, which is this one up here called Sortilegio. We've done some earlier stage work, but we're in a different rock there called it's a sandstone, and its reductant was gas, a sour gas. So gas permeates through a rock, and so we're seeing much more consistent mineralization, running percentage levels, and much thicker 10 to 20 meter wide thicknesses. So I really like what I see at Sortilegio for those reasons. We did get the DIA about a year ago, and we've been struggling to get the initiate activities. And I mentioned it before because we've got local people there who are not title holders. They're essentially squatters. They've signed off. They want us to do the work. But we've had some very small group of activists against the project who've including a couple of local politicians, Congress people, who've made it quite difficult and put pressure on the authorities, and it's become a bit of a bureaucratic go-around. So we're still waiting to get the easement now from the local authorities to give us the easement to say, yes, we own the land and you've got authority to work there. So we're waiting to get that initiate activities. So it's absolutely frustrating. We don't see that those gains at all in Valiente, and thank goodness we don't. But we've been waiting for this year essentially to get that initiate activities. JOGMEC are still very strong partners, and we've got a twofold budget for next year. One is let's wait to just do the social work. You can't stop the social work, so we've still got a team of 4 people in San Martin doing the social work. And let's keep that going through the year. Then we've got the social team work in the budget too, plus a drilling budget, which is 2,500 meters in the first instance to drill these areas. So if Peru continues to improve in the rule of law, which we've been following at every manner, and the local people who want this project have any say, hopefully we'll be drilling that sometime in the first half of this year. But it's a little harder to say. So that's where that project's at.
And Sortilegio, what's the path to get that railroad at this moment?
Not Sortilegio. That's the porphyry in Valiente.
Sorry, the northwestern target at San Martin. Sorry.
Sortilegio, yeah.
Sortilegio.
The earlier stage. So it's we haven't started the DIA there yet, and we haven't started it because we're waiting to get the approval for the first DIA. No use spending money in a district if we can't demonstrate the process is transparent and open, and we can get the job done, basically. So we put that just on ice for the moment while we're trying to work through what are political issues, and we're not absent of support, I should say that, the local people, but also we're getting support from the federal government, and we've been encouraged to continue and do the good work that we're doing, and bringing the rule of law and order into this part of Peru that hasn't seen a lot of formal mining activities, and because we're new into these areas, we're breaking those barriers. So obviously we're the first movers, and that's how we found all this copper. But we're also educating and learning as we go along.
Okay, very good. So I think we should also just briefly chat about Cerro Rolando. It's sort of at this point. The market cap has come up quite a bit, but it still could move the share price, I think, if it works out. So what's the status with Cerro Rolando? Do you expect to do a limited program there still? Or is it?
Yeah, we do. It's a very small project area. So we have this tenement that we did a deal on, a cheap deal. We know the people very well who owned it. They knew of historic mag and EM, and there was a big anomaly there. It's right on a big structure in the backyard of elephants, if you like. So you can see his Chuquicamata is in a slightly different age rocks here, but it's very close to it's on some very similar structures. So it's in the footprint of some of the where the world sources most of its copper, and it's undercover. So again, we're dealing with a situation here where we're not seeing the rocks at all. It's got hundreds of meters of scree, which they call the pampa, that's shed off the Andes and deposited on top of the rocks out through here. And it's really the frontier for Chile and its next discoveries. And if you've got a mag target, which could be a porphyry, and it's conductive, that could be the chalcocite enrichment blanket over the top of the porphyry. Then it's certainly a target of merit. We did reproduce the mag and the EM because we didn't have access to the data, the original data, and sure enough, we replicated a big mag anomaly and a number of conductors that looked to have sense. And we're getting very close to drilling that. So again, it's taken longer than we wanted. We thought we'd be drilling last year, but we just have had some very positive support from the mining authorities, and they've been even working it over the Christmas period. And hopefully we'll be doing something within the first quarter there. Stay tuned for more news there, and it will only be a very, 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 very small program, like a 150-meter drill hole in the first instance, to test the conductor that we found. And if it's just salty water, then we'll move on. If we hit basement and any sort of copper, we're onto something, and then we'll put more holes into it. So it's really to test the concept. The mag target is a lot deeper. It's 600 or 700 meters deep. That's not our target. We're not trying to go and find a porphyry that deep, because that's not our aim here. It's just to see if there's copper in the system, and if the copper is replicated by that conductor that we see at about less than 100 meters depth. So that's what we'll be doing here.
And then if you're going to take it down all the way down to the mag anomaly as well, obviously. I mean, if you encounter copper 150 meters down, then you'll keep
we wouldn't stop. No.
And yeah, that's Q1, Q2 sort of thing, and you'll provide updates for that. And just very quickly, Mike, I guess the initial indications of what the hypothetical size could be if it turns out to be a mineralized target appearing that shallowly. You have geophysics and at least.
Look at again, the airborne EM model suggests a conductor over 1.2 kilometers. So it's sort of the scale of Ricardo or Sortilegio.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a potential company maker if it plays out.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I think that's good for now, Mike, and we're staying eagerly tuned here to see how the drilling will go. It's been a long journey to get there, but now you're there, and you're gonna start drilling these targets, the first targets in the system. So it's gonna be super great to see it, Belen. So I guess we'll say farewell for now, and we'll reconvene in maybe 5-6 months or something like this when the first couple of results are trickling in, hopefully.
I look forward to it.